So when you hear virtual reality, your mind probably jumps straight to gaming, right? But what if I told you that same tech is now being used to train soldiers, firefighters, and police officers for some of the most dangerous situations on Earth? Today, we're going to explore how VR is making the leap from our living rooms straight to the front lines of defense and emergency response. To really get why this shift is happening, you first have to understand the stakes, and they are high. Get this, back in 2017, a truly shocking statistic came out. It revealed that the US military lost nearly 4 times as many people in training accidents as they did in actual combat. You heard that right. So traditional training, while absolutely essential, carries just immense risk and cost. This created a huge urgent need for a better, safer way to prepare. And this is exactly where VR steps in. You see, traditional training often involves high-risk live exercises. It burns through massive resources like fuel and water, and honestly, it can be really tough to replicate the same scenario over and over again. Virtual training, on the other hand, well, it offers a totally safe environment where these incredibly complex, dangerous situations can be repeated endlessly. And it's all done with zero risk to life, zero carbon emissions, and at just a fraction of the cost. All right, here's our mission briefing for today. We'll start with the virtual proving ground to see why everyone's jumping on board. Then we'll dive into training for the modern soldier, see how we're forging first responders, and check out policing in the metaverse. After that, we'll tackle the big question: is virtual training actually better? We'll look at the data. And finally, we'll gaze into the future of readiness. So first up, the virtual proving ground. This is all about the huge shift in thinking, moving away from just physical training and really embracing these digital, risk-free environments to get ready for the real world. Now, let's gear up and talk about training the modern soldier. We're going to go inside the virtual battlefields that are being used right now to prepare forces for the really complex nature of modern warfare. And listen, this isn't some sci-fi far-off tech. It's happening right now all over the world. The US Army is using systems like the Engagement Skills Trainer for marksmanship and the incredible Virtual Battle Space, or BBS-4. Meanwhile, South Korea is really pushing the limits with their Mars rifle simulator. It actually accounts for real ballistic curves. And the TAD simulator, which uses haptic feedback to let soldiers literally feel the fight. You know, the really cool thing about VBS-4 isn't just that it has a bunch of pre-made scenarios. No, it's basically a massive training sandbox. This means soldiers on the ground can quickly build and run their own custom drills, anything from practicing convoy security to learning how to spot enemy vehicles or even flying a UAG. It's all about being adaptable and user-driven. To give you a real sense of the immersion here, let's walk through what it's like in that South Korean TAD simulator. So first, trainees gear up, and the equipment they wear has the same shape and weight as their real combat load. Then they step into a virtual world that is a direct copy of their unit's actual area of operations. And get this, their combat vest has 9 different vibration sensors that go off when they're hit by enemy fire. They know instantly that they've been shot. And the technology's role doesn't just stop when the fighting does. VR is also becoming a really powerful tool for healing. It's being used in treatment programs for post-traumatic stress disorder, where these simulations help service members safely confront and process the trauma of combat. Okay, our next section is all about forging first responders. We're shifting gears to look at firefighters and medics who are using VR to train for the absolute worst-case scenarios, all in a completely safe, controlled, and repeatable way. This quote from the chair of Breakthrough Victoria really nails it. At its heart, this technology is all about using innovation to protect the protectors themselves. It's about giving them the experience they need without putting them in harm's way before they even get to the real thing. So a huge part of making this training feel real is something called haptic feedback. What is that? Well, it's basically technology that simulates the sense of touch. For firefighters, for example, platforms like flame systems use haptics to recreate the intense physical pushback of a fully charged fire hose. It makes the virtual experience feel incredibly physically real. And the benefits here go way beyond just safety. VR training massively cuts down on a firefighter's exposure to nasty carcinogens found in traditional training films. It uses zero water, creates zero carbon emissions, making it a much greener alternative. And what's more, a single system can simulate over 80 different scenarios, from a basic house fire all the way to a complex bushfire or even an aircraft emergency. And it's not just for the firefighters on the front line holding the hose. There are also higher-level platforms, like XVR Simulation, designed for incident commanders. These let the leaders practice managing huge, complicated emergencies that involve multiple agencies, fire, medics, police, the whole shebang, all from a virtual command post. It's all about sharpening those strategic decision-making skills. All right, next, we're stepping into the world of policing in the metaverse. We're going to see how VR is being used to train officers for what might be the most critical part of their job, making the right call under extreme, intense pressure. The key idea here is practice without peril. Think about it. In these simulations, an officer can face a high-stakes traffic stop that suddenly turns hostile, or a domestic dispute, or a mental health crisis call that requires incredible patience. They can practice de-escalation tactics over and over and over again, building that muscle memory for calm, effective decision-making, all without any risk to themselves or to the public. So we've seen how it's being used across the board. But that brings us to the million-dollar question. Does all this actually make a better soldier, a better firefighter, or a better police officer? Let's take a look at the data. I mean, this is the question that really matters, right? Is this just a fancy, super expensive video game, or does it actually produce real, measurable results in the field? Well, the evidence seems to point to a big yes. A study took 105 Korean military personnel and put them through that immersive TAD combat simulator we talked about earlier. The results? A significant increase in what they call combat performance self-efficacy. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but in simple terms, it means after the VR training, soldiers felt way more competent and capable in their ability to perform in a real combat situation. But okay, how does VR actually stack up against other methods? Well, one study compared firefighters learning a building layout in VR versus just studying blueprints. Turns out both were effective, and the VR performance was right on par. But check this out. When it came to marksmanship, a study on that Mars simulator found that soldiers who trained in VR 4 or more times had better accuracy in live-fire drills and a higher chance of becoming an elite shooter than those with less or no VR training. So, what's next? Where does all this go from here? Well, integrating VR is really just the beginning. The next frontier is all about connecting these virtual worlds together and, more importantly, making them smarter with AI. You can see this clear evolution, right? We started with high-risk, high-cost live drills. Then we moved to desktop simulators, which were safer but, not very immersive. Today, we've got this incredible immersive VR. But the next step, kind of the holy grail, is what some people are starting to call the military metaverse, a single, unified training world that's powered by AI. And this isn't just a dream. The Pentagon's new AI-first strategy is actively working on this right now. The goal is to create a massive, interconnected simulation where you can integrate AI-driven opponents, practice tactics for autonomous drone swarms, and use generative AI to create new, adaptive scenarios on the fly. It's about building a training ecosystem that is truly intelligent and responsive. And this brings us to a final and pretty profound question that even the researchers are grappling with. As these virtual worlds become almost indistinguishable from reality, as we get better and better at simulating the stress and even the horror of combat or a disaster, we have to ask ourselves, how do we prepare our protectors for psychological trauma without accidentally causing it in the process? That is a critical, ethical line we're all going to have to navigate as this technology keeps evolving.